Hi there, and welcome to another podcast with me, Troy Francis, coming at you from London town. So it is the 4th of November, Monday. I am recording this. It'll probably be a slightly shorter show than usual, or it might be if I don't ramble on too much, because it's quite a crazy day. But I just wanted to go into a little bit of a rant about beware of be a better man advice. So that's the topic for today, which I'll go into in a minute. So as I say, it's going to be a bit of a rant, may not go on for too long because I've got lots and lots of other things that I need to get done, unfortunately, because that is how it is in the world of the busy online digital nomad entrepreneur, or whatever you want to call me, really. So there you go. However, just an update on a couple of bits and pieces. You can still get my 10 books about dating, game, the sexual marketplace, sexual dynamics, social dynamics, all of those cool things for the ridiculously low price of $39 in my bundle, which is called Renegade Dating Blueprint. You can get the PDFs of all of those books, including How to Be an Arsehole, 7 Laws of Seduction, Still in the Game, and so on and so forth. Plus many more, all bundled together for $39. The full value of that bundle is $250 plus, so I would encourage you to get on board with that sooner rather than later, because obviously at some point I'm going to have a look at that price again. So the link for that is below. It's called Renegade Dating Blueprint. Do get on board with that as soon as you can. Also sign up for my daily email list if you haven't already. The link is below. I send out a free article Monday to Friday, most weeks, and every week really, unless I have to miss it for some particular reason on a certain day. But generally speaking, I'm sending out 5 emails a week with a free article, plus news, giveaways, offers, goodies like that, etc. And some of the secret stuff that I don't necessarily put out on social media. So do get onto that. The email list, the link is below. And finally, if you're listening to this on YouTube, do hit the subscribe button. Also, please give me a like. That would be really appreciated. But do hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell, because that just signals to YouTube that you like this content, you're keen to hear more, and it helps me to sort of bump up the rankings and spread the word, if you like, about Troy Francis and the Renegade Playboy life. Okay, so I want to do a quick rant, as I say, about this thing about be a better man advice, if you like. And I've called the show Beware of Be a Better Man advice, because I think that this advice is dangerous, potentially. At best, it's misguided. At worst, it could actually be downright dangerous, and it could lead guys into entirely the wrong direction. And I think for the wrong reasons. I believe that the motivations for this kind of advice that gets spread around in the men's space online, on Twitter, on YouTube, on other social media channels, is largely motivated by a desire for an ego boost for the content creators in question, and also profit as well, because of course, generally speaking, they want to sell you something. They want to sell you coaching, they want to sell you books, they want to sell you courses, etc., etc. Now, full disclosure, of course, I'm selling stuff as well, which I've just spent the first couple of minutes of this podcast doing. So you're very well aware that obviously I make an income from this space as well. And yes, I'm selling books. Yes, I'm selling coaching. Yes, I'm selling Skype consultations and all of those good things. However, I would say that I have always endeavored to the best of my ability to be as honest as I can in the content when I'm talking about my own life experiences, when I'm talking about observations of life, when I'm talking about the sort of advice that I offer and the limits of that advice as well. Because let's be clear, nobody out there can be a miracle worker. Nobody can say, okay, you're a male too, and I'm going to transform you so that overnight you're going to be pulling supermodels, or you're going to be, married to the woman of your dreams, or whatever. There's always a limit to what any coach or what any advisor or writer can do, and I've always tried to be very honest about that. I've tried to be honest about my own experiences, my successes, my failures, and yet in terms of talking about the way that human beings interrelate, I have endeavored, and I continue to do so, to be as honest as I can about that. Probably to the point of being slightly negative, and people can say, well, you're pessimistic or you're nihilistic or whatever. I don't really think that's the case, but I think you have to be realistic. And so I try to be honest in terms of not only things that have happened to me, but also the things that I've seen around me, perhaps in my family. We see a lot of, obviously, like celebrity stories. We see a lot of news stories. I have many friends who are both in this space and nothing to do with this space whatsoever, obviously family, etc., etc. So I get to see, like most people, I get to see quite a lot of the real-time effects of the sexual marketplace, if you like. I get to see the realities of relationships, marriage, family, etc., etc. And look, I've got friends of all different ages. I'm quite fortunate in that regard. I know lots of people from different backgrounds. I know guys and women who are in their, who are much older than me, who are in their 60s, their 70s, and so on. I also know people who are a lot younger. I have many contemporaries of the same age as well. So, and of course as well, I'm in the unique position, or relatively unique position, of coaching people as well. So I also have that input additionally. So all of that means that I've got, what I like to think is a pretty wide experience of this field, a pretty wide knowledge of the sexual marketplace, of the consequences of decisions that you might make around dating, around marriage, around divorce, all of those different things. And yeah, I try to tell it how it is. I try not to sugarcoat it. I also try not to be too desperately negative. But as I say, I think you need to be realistic. And when you're realistic, that actually sets you free, because it allows you to make informed decisions which aren't sort of weighed down by how can I put it, avert positivity or sort of Pollyanna-ish thinking or wishful thinking. This is how things are. Okay, based on that, what am I going to do? How am I going to move forward from that point? So in the sort of online space where this kind of advice is and this kind of discussion goes on, which I'm part of, I guess, for my sins, a particular bugbear of mine has always been this sort of be a better man type advice. Because in my view, it's derivative, it's cliched, and frankly, it's pretty useless for a number of reasons. So what I'm talking about here really is, you get content creators, you get companies, organizations who will sell the idea that you need to be, in inverted commas, a better man, and you need to man up and do the right thing and behave in a particular way or engage in a particular set of behaviors in order to achieve this goal of being a better man, and they will teach you how you do it. And it can go across a number of different pillars. So fitness is one, get built, get the sort of Greek god physique. Another is relationships. These are the kinds of relationships you should be in. These are the kinds of people you should date. These are the outcomes you should be looking for in your relationships. And generally speaking, this veers very much towards the traditional. So there isn't much room here for somebody to say, well, I want to have a sort of, this kind of relationship that hasn't been particularly explored before. It's all very, very traditional. It's all very prescriptive. The sorts of things you should read. I mean, it's very fashionable in the men's space to talk about reading the classics. And by that, I mean the Greek and Roman classics. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I would absolutely recommend that to anybody. But I mean, just recently, I've seen somebody saying, the likes of Bukowski, the likes of Henry Miller, the likes of I think even Hemingway was mentioned. He said these people are all useless, yesterday's men. We all read the classics now. That's what it's all about. It should be about fine, noble, upstanding mores and ideas of antiquity, of days gone by, because we are seeking to recreate this wonderful golden era of masculinity. And so these are the role models we have now. If you have these other types of role models, the Bukowskis, the Hubert Selby Juniors, the Henry Millers, and so on, then you are a degenerate and you should be ashamed of yourself. That kind of attitude. So even the sorts of cultural figures that you're supposed to follow are being critiqued by these voices, these be a better man voices. So every aspect of your life, if you're not careful, will come under the scrutiny of people who are, for one reason or another, advising you in this way. And I think it's, as I say, derivative, cliche, and useless for a number of reasons. Firstly, because look, I mean, let me put it like this. When you think about advice for, say, something like how to get better with dating, how to get better with girls, okay, there are tangible bits of advice that can be given to you in that instance, even down to things like what should I say, what should I dress when I go on the date, how long should I take in between text messages, all of these different things. There's very specific sort of tangible bits of information that can be imparted. Similarly, with fitness, there are very specific pieces of information that can be communicated. So how many reps do I do? How heavy in order to achieve this particular result? How many times a week should I go to the gym? What length, duration of rest break should I have? What should I be eating? All of these different things. Very specific information. How to be a better man, and okay, I know it incorporates those two pillars, but the more generic how to be a better man advice is not only pretty nebulous, but also you kind of know it already. You kind of know already how to be a better man. You know what the constituent elements are going to look like. It's about honesty, it's about courage, it's about speaking up for yourself, it's about defending others more vulnerable than yourself. It's about that sense of honor, fidelity, so on and so forth. We've all got a pretty good idea already what, in inverted commas, being a better man looks like. Why? Because society has drilled it into us since when we were kids. Okay, now look, obviously there are outliers. There are people who were brought up in the woods by wolves and things, and perhaps they need to be taught these things. But in general, in the vast majority of cases, we already know the how to be a better man material because it's already ingrained into our culture. It's what we've been taught by the media. It's what we've been taught by teachers, by movies, by popular characters within TV shows, in novels, in stories, so on and so forth. This material about being the archetypal, honourable, noble, brave, cultured man is already out there in spades. We don't need some bloke with a Twitter account with a few thousand people on it, or some bloke with a YouTube channel to tell us about this stuff, because we already hear it all the time. And all you have to do actually is go to the classics, is go to Greek literature, Roman literature, or indeed Victorian literature, in order to get your fill of all that kind of content. It's all out there already. And to be honest, as I say, it doesn't take a genius. We all kind of know this stuff already. Guys come to this space, guys come to the manosphere, whatever you want to call it, in order to solve specific problems. And they have these problems in their lives, usually with women initially, but also, with perhaps income, perhaps with their fitness, perhaps with different things. They come to the space because traditional advice hasn't worked out very well for them. If it had, then there wouldn't be any point in having a manosphere, because the traditional advice to be a better man, to hold your head high and your shoulders back and be courageous and all of that, would have worked very well, and guys would already be happy. Guys, everything would be working perfectly, and so this space, whatever you want to call it, wouldn't have had to have been invented, because there would be no demand. But there is a demand. There has been a demand, which is proven by the fact that the space has grown up at all and continues to attract new entrants all the time. So therefore, the conclusion that we have to draw is that by and large, the conventional advice isn't working very well. And so if the traditional advice isn't working very well, then clearly there is a need for something else. And my bugbear with all of this really is that the space, up until quite recently, offered that something else. The space offered a different way of looking at things. And I think the manner of looking at things that's sort of enshrined within the space until fairly recently has been the no more Mr. Nice Guy way of looking at things. Because generally speaking, the dudes that come at this material tend to be dudes who are nice guys who are already good guys, who already have done everything correctly, who are honourable, brave, courageous, will speak up in the fight against injustice, and all, will protect their women folk, and all of that stuff. And it hasn't worked out very well for them. They've ended up divorced, they've ended up dumped, they've ended up cheated on, they've ended up being disrespected, they've ended up being made the butt of jokes, as we see, in terms of advertising and everything with guys all the time these days. It hasn't worked out very well for them, and they've come to this space in search of something else, which up until quite recently was being provided for them. Now, here's the thing, right? What about the popularity of the book 48 Laws of Power in the men's space until fairly recently? So 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. If you haven't read it, you should definitely read it. Fantastic book, full of, 48 laws of how to get ahead, 48 laws of how to get one over your opponents, if you like, how to win at the game of life, how to win at the political game. And they're not politically correct. They're not always nice. They're not, some of them you might think, well, that's a little bit underhand, perhaps, but they are effective if used properly, or they can be effective if used properly. That book was and it remains incredibly popular in the men's space because it's effective, because it acknowledges that sometimes you have to be a bit Machiavellian, and of course Machiavelli is mentioned frequently in that book and is a big influence on it. And Machiavelli himself, you should read The Prince if you haven't read that already. But it's acknowledged that you need to be a bit cut and thrust. You need to be a little bit underhand sometimes. You need to find different ways around problems, because the straightforward, upright and honourable mode that we're all taught since school, since birth really, doesn't always work for us. And actually the cads win out, the bastards win. The non-nice guys are the guys who run off with the spoils. So as nice guys, we need to be taught, okay, there is a different way of going about this. There are different strategies. Here they are, dark triad strategies. You don't have to be like this the whole time, but you need to be aware of them, because you need to fight against other people who are going to be using them, because make no mistake, other people out there are going to be using underhand strategies against you, and you need to be able to employ them yourself when necessary in order to get your way. Okay, now just recently, I've seen on Twitter some pretty prominent members of the manosphere, if you like, of the sort of purple pill sphere of guys who really, really lean into this be a better man shtick, speaking out against 48 Laws of Power. And actually saying, it's actually a damaging book. It's and I think, digging down a little bit, I think the reason that they are now turning against it is because they've turned philosophically against this whole idea of, being a little bit shifty, of using your opponent's weight against him, of finding sort of slightly innovative and clever ways to get the upper hand, because they're so bought into this, and what is essentially a blue pill, really, ideal of being the best man that you can be, building a better beater. And because they're leaning into that archetype, suddenly the Robert Greene 48 Laws of Power thing becomes suspect. Suddenly it's like, well, hang on a minute, this is you don't want to be like that. You don't want to be like one of these underhand knaves who uses these laws in order to sort of twist things so that they get their way. You should just be a good, strong, patriarchal man, and everything will be fine. Well, okay, except it isn't. Except that manifestly doesn't work, because otherwise guys wouldn't come to this space in the first place in order to find different solutions. Otherwise, 48 Laws of Power wouldn't have been a massive hit. Otherwise, we wouldn't still be talking about Machiavelli hundreds of years after the fact. So, as I say, I think these dudes who want us all to be good, upstanding men are enthralled to this idea, enthralled to the blue pill idea of the good, dutiful beater, and that's what they want to teach. And as I say, often these dudes are selling things. They're selling courses, they're selling books, resources of different kinds, and coaching. So not only are they selling their ideas, but they're also selling for profit their services. And as I said, of course, I am as well. So it's down to you to decide, really, of everybody that you follow. You need to do due diligence. You need to look at them and you need to think, well, is this person offering honest value or not? But I can't help but think that when somebody is just offering you exactly what the mainstream is teaching you, but they're just packaging it up in a slightly different way and trying to make it cool again, then you have to think to yourself, well, hang on a minute, what value am I really getting from this person's teaching? Because all they're teaching me is what society's taught me for X number of years of my life. And what outcomes did that lead to? Well, it led me to being divorced. It led me to, losing custody to my kids. It led me to being cheated on, all of these different things. And you sort of think, well, okay, so if this dude is just going to teach me exactly the same things that society's taught me and it's led to those outcomes, then should I really be paying this person money and attention, or should I be looking at different strategies in order to get through? And I think the answer to that's pretty obvious, really, myself. Be a better man sets you up for failure, and it sets you up for decimation if you're not careful. So you need something that's more renegade, to kind of phrase. You need to. I mean, there's a phrase for this, isn't there? I'm trying to think of it now. But basically, you need to understand what the bad guys are doing. Even if you're not a bad guy yourself, you need to know what they're doing. You need to understand it. And at times, you need to be able to become that shapeshifter, and you can take on some of that archetype yourself. Because, as I say, people are going to use it against you. And so you need to be able to return fire on them, even if only temporarily. So it doesn't mean that when you look for advice, that is, or when you take advice, when you reject this sort of be a good man shtick, be a better beta shtick, and you look for something that's a little bit more renegade in terms of game or in terms of self-development or just, political life or whatever, it doesn't mean that you should become a bad person. Now, I've got a book called How to Be an Arsehole, which I mentioned earlier. You can get it on Amazon. It's probably it's my best-selling book, actually, by some margin. It came out a couple of years ago, and it's done very, very well, continues to sell very well. And I think the reason for that is that, guys like the title, they probably like the cover and so on, but they understand that there is a need, because the book concerns itself with dark triad techniques, dark triad approaches to life. So I talk about narcissism, psychopathy, sadism, and Machiavellianism, and I talk about how, as a nice guy, you might incorporate little bits of that into your conduct in order to, get the results you want in life. What I don't say is that you should become this kind of dark triad psychopathic character wholly, but you need to be aware of the tools. You need to be aware of the techniques and to be able to pepper your actions with them in order to create positive outcomes for yourself. It's not about becoming a bad person, in inverted commas, but it is about being street smart, and it is about having the tools to fight back against opponents who aren't necessarily going to be following Queensberry rules, if we use a boxing analogy. These are street fighters. They are going to try and take you down by whatever means necessary. This is just the nature of the world. So you need to be aware of the rules, or rather the realities of the street fight, as opposed to just the classical rules of boxing, where it's all mediated by a referee and so on. Because there aren't any referees out there, or there are, but they're not necessarily always effective. So you've got to know how to fight dirty, even if that's not really who you are, and even if that's not how you intend to behave all of the time. And you don't have to. You don't have to. Nobody's saying to be a bad guy, but just be sensible. Just look after yourself. Just be sure that you know and have at your disposal the tools and techniques that you can use in a marketplace that isn't always going to be fluffy and friendly, that isn't always going to go your way, with people who don't always have your best interests at heart. Because look, and this is at the bottom of really everything that I do, you are an individual. You're only going to live for a certain amount of time. You're only going to live for and a few more, however many more years it is. Myself, I am probably over halfway through my life now. I've probably lived, probably what I've got left is going to be shorter than what I've already had. And with that in mind, you have to think, okay, so what outcomes do I want, and how am I going to achieve those outcomes? And what are the antagonists in my life going to do to stop me getting there? And the antagonists could be other people, circumstances, monetary limitations, governments, all kinds of different things. So you've got to think, okay, so what are my antagonists going to do to prevent me from getting the things that I want? And how am I going to counter that? How am I going to say, okay, fine, this is what the antagonists want to happen, but I want something else to happen, so this is what I'm going to do to achieve that. And that's where you need the 48 laws of power type stuff. That's where you need the dark triad stuff. That's where all of this be a better man type stuff that you hear being spouted by these purple pill people is not necessarily going to stand you in the best stead, and you need something else. As I say, I already know how to be a good man. I don't think there's any real secret around that. I think we're all aware of the road to, I think we all should know, or certainly should know, how to behave in a sort of honourable, decent way. That's not really the problem. That's not what most guys have a problem with. What most guys have a problem with is that they get screwed over by a world that is indifferent and indeed sometimes callous towards them. And that is what we are, or what we should be concerned with helping out with in the men's space. And, that's why all of this advice around dating and games sprung up, but increasingly also around just how to live life, how to negotiate life. And yeah, you need to look at alternative solutions, and you need to look at alternative ways of conducting yourself, so that you can just ensure that you protect yourself, and also so that you can thrive in an environment that can be challenging, because that's just how things are, And I'm not saying it should be any other way. I've always been very much of the opinion that you should take things as they are, whether it's in the dating field, whether it's in employment, whether it's in business, fitness, whatever it is. You should accept things as they are and say, okay, how can I make the best in this situation for myself? And that's really what I want to communicate with my stuff, in my books about dating, in my coaching calls and everything else. It's about how do you take your circumstances as they are and get the best for yourself. And sometimes you've got to play dirty, because that's just the way things are. And I think all of these exhortations to, be the best you can be, just encourages guys to be beaters, basically, and just encourages guys to set themselves up for attack by underhanded people on occasion, and that's just not doing anyone any favours. So anyway, bit of a rant. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you got something out of that. Do let me know your thoughts on this topic. Do pick up Renegade Dating Blueprint, link below, for $39. Do get on my daily email list, link below. Do give me a like for this video if you liked it, and do hit subscribe on my channel and hit the notifications button for loads of world-class, high-quality content of this kind that's going to be coming to you from me very, very soon. I'll leave it there for now. Bye-bye.